The bank said I owed $750,000, but I never signed a thing. My wife used my name to buy her boyfriend a house. What I did next made her face go pale. It was a Thursday. I remember because the office cafeteria was serving their sad attempt at beef stroganoff, and I was halfway through picking out the mushrooms when my phone buzzed. At first I almost ignored it. Probably another calendar reminder or one of those spam calls offering a free cruise in exchange for my soul. But something made me glance at the screen. Sentinel Bank, Mortgage Department. I frowned. I didn't have a mortgage with Sentinel Bank. In fact, I didn't have a mortgage at all. I answered more out of curiosity than concern. The cheery voice greeted me on the other end. "Hello, Mr. Devlin, we're calling regarding your third missed mortgage payment for the Duskwood property. We've sent several notices, and this call is to confirm." Wait, I'm sorry," I said, trying not to sound rude. "You must have the wrong Marcus Devlin. I don't own a home. I rent. You've got the wrong guy." She paused for a beat, clearly used to denial from behind to borrowers. "I understand, sir, but can I confirm your birth date and the last 4 digits of your social?" I gave them, more amused than alarmed. But when she read back my details and they matched perfectly, my stomach dropped. "We mailed and emailed your statements," she added, voice now tinged with concern. "Would you like me to resend them?" "Yes," I muttered, "please." To this email I gave her my personal address. She thanked me, wished me luck catching up on payments, and hung up just like that. The moment I ended the call, I stopped tasting the stroganoff. I sat there, phone trembling slightly in my hand. My head was spinning, trying to make sense of something that made none. I pulled up my email and opened a spam folder, something I rarely checked unless I was bored. There it was. Multiple messages flagged as urgent, payment overdue, foreclosure warning, my name, my information. A balance of $746,000 and change. 3 missed payments. An address I'd never seen in my life. I clicked on one of the attached PDF statements and opened the original mortgage contract, and then I saw it. My name typed neatly at the bottom of the agreement. And a signature, one that looked like it had been practicing being me. It was close enough to pass at first glance, but I could tell, it wasn't mine. The loops in the D were too tight. The tail of the N slanted upward, like someone mimicking confidence they didn't actually have. Whoever signed it had tried really hard to be me. I leaned back in my chair and felt my lungs seize up. This wasn't just some clerical error. Someone had taken my name, my identity, and used it to secure $750,000 of debt. But who would? I didn't even let the thought finish. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew. I drove home early. I didn't tell my boss or finish lunch. I just grabbed my jacket and keys and walked out of the building like I was on fire. My apartment was 20 minutes away, but the road blurred beneath my tires. I couldn't feel the wheel. Couldn't feel my fingers. All I saw was that fake signature. All I heard was that woman's voice on the phone, reading my birthday like it belonged to a stranger. When I walked through the door, she was in the kitchen, my wife. She was making tea. The scent of lemon and ginger filled the room. She smiled when she saw me. "You're home early," she said. "Everything okay?" I didn't answer right away. I walked to the counter, opened my laptop and pulled up the mortgage email. I turned the screen toward her. "You want to explain this?" Her eyes flicked down to the screen. Her smile didn't even twitch. She just set her teacup down and shrugged. "Oh, that. My voice cracked, but I didn't raise it. "They say I bought a house for $750,000. Technically you did." She was calm, too calm. "I mean, your name is on the paperwork. It just made things easier." "Easier?" I asked, blinking. "Easier for who?" She didn't answer. Just picked up her cup and walked to the living room. Like this conversation didn't have the power to destroy our lives. I followed her. "Did you forge my signature?" "You weren't using your credit for anything serious," she said, as if that made it better. "I didn't think you'd mind." I stood there frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. She'd signed a mortgage in my name without my knowledge for a house I didn't know existed. And she said I wouldn't mind? "Who's living there?" I asked. Though part of me already knew. I'd noticed the extra gym clothes in the laundry lately. A second cologne scent lingering after she'd been out late. Things I told myself not to overthink. She hesitated. "No one really. I mean a friend. He needed a place." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't laugh I might break something. "A friend." She didn't respond. Her silence was the loudest confession I'd ever heard. I turned and walked back toward the door. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to breathe air that wasn't soaked in betrayal. Before I left, I looked back at her one last time. She was sitting there with her tea, legs crossed, eyes blank like she couldn't understand why I was upset. And in that moment I realized something chilling. This wasn't guilt. This wasn't regret. This was routine. The drive to the condo felt longer than usual, though it was only 20 minutes. When your world starts unraveling, time doesn't just slow, it mocks you. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't open the windows. I just drove, the quiet in the car louder than anything I'd heard all day. My hands were still shaking on the wheel, not from fear, from something else, something that sat in my gut like a brick. Disbelief, betrayal. The knowledge that the woman I came home to every night had sold my name like a second-hand coat. When I pulled into the driveway and parked, I just sat there for a moment, breathing. I couldn't go back inside without answers, but I also couldn't pretend I didn't already know. Talia had done this. She'd used my trust, my identity, my credit me, and she wasn't sorry. She was smug, relaxed even. Like forging a man's name on a $750,000 loan was just another item on her to-do list. Inside the apartment, she was in the bedroom, scrolling through her phone with one leg tucked under her. The same woman who used to wait for me at the door with takeout and a grin now looked up like I was the one interrupting her peace. "Back again?" she asked. "You're acting like someone died." I didn't sit. I didn't even remove my jacket. I opened my email and scrolled to the PDF of the signed mortgage agreement. I zoomed in on the signature line and turned the screen toward her. "Who wrote this?" I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. Like I was trying to negotiate with a live grenade. She sighed, tossed the phone aside. "Why are we still talking about this? I told you it was just easier. The loan officer needed a name with strong credit. You weren't using yours." I did what made sense. "What made sense?" I echoed. "Talia, this is fraud. This is identity theft. This is Relax," she cut in, waving her hand like I was being dramatic. "You act like I ruined your life. I didn't steal from you. I didn't run off with your savings. I just used your name, and you're still here, still working, still fine. So what's the problem?" That was the moment I understood just how far apart we really were. She didn't see it as betrayal, she saw it as resourcefulness, like she was solving a puzzle and I was just one of the pieces. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized I didn't know the woman I'd married. Not truly. I opened a browser and started digging. It didn't take long. The forwarding address on the mortgage documents wasn't some clerical accident. It was real. I found it in a luxury gated community just outside the city, Duskwood. I'd never been inside, only passed it on my way to work. The kind of place with palm-lined streets, security guards at the entrance, and HOA fees that could pay off my car. There it was, listed online in a recent just-sold post for 82 Alderview Court, sold under my name. Photos of the interior flashed before me like a cruel joke. Vaulted ceilings, designer kitchen, backyard pool, everything I'd never had, never even wanted, and yet apparently now owned. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Then I grabbed my keys and left. "Where are you going?" she asked. "I'm going to see the house I paid for." I didn't wait for a reply. Driving into Duskwood felt like stepping into a movie set. Perfect launch, identical mailboxes, everyone's sprinklers on some secret schedule. I slowed down as I neared Alderview Court. I didn't even have to guess which house it was. I knew it. There she was, on the porch, laughing, wearing black leggings and an oversized tee, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked at home, comfortable like she belonged. She had a drink in one hand, iced coffee, judging by the condensation, and she was leaning against a man. He was tall, muscular in that way gym trainers tend to be. Close shave, sunglasses, tattoos snaking up his arm. He had one hand on her hip and the other casually holding a leash to a golden retriever. He leaned in and kissed her cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I just stood there in my car watching the woman I married play house with someone else on a property bought under my name. They didn't see me. I didn't want them to. I drove off without a word. Not because I was scared. Because I was done playing checkers. This wasn't going to be another argument where I raised my voice and she rolled her eyes. This was war, quiet, calculated, surgical, and I wasn't going to lose. That night back at the condo I didn't speak. Talia was out late, probably back at the porch with him. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring at the copy of the mortgage again. I printed it out, circled every piece of forged information, marked the fake signature with a red pen like I was grading a failing exam. I highlighted the names. I noted the timestamps on the emails, and then I opened my drawer and pulled out an old business card. Shay Rourke, an old college friend. Now one of the toughest fraud lawyers in the city. I hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. But people like her didn't forget who stood by them when they were still scrapping for internships. I picked up my phone and called. "Shay," I said when she answered, groggy from sleep. "Marcus," she replied, voice clearing. "Well, it's been a minute, yeah. And I need a favor." "What kind?" "The kind that comes with forged signatures, $750,000 in debt, and a man living in my house with my wife." There was silence on the line for a second. Then her voice dropped into that tone I remembered from our debate days, calm, confident, lethal. "Meet me in the morning, bring everything." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "Don't worry," she added, "we're going to bury them." And for the first time that day I exhaled. The next morning, I woke up to silence, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, doesn't soothe, the kind that stretches across a room like a ghost, reminding you that everything familiar is now foreign. Talia hadn't come home. Not that I expected her to. I think she knew better than to face me after what I saw. Still, some part of me hoped she'd come through the door with an apology, even a lie I could see through. But nothing. I dressed without thinking, just jeans, a plain shirt, and my oldest sneakers, the kind you don't care about getting dirty. This wasn't a confrontation. This was reconnaissance. I needed to see them again on their turf in the world they'd built using my name. I left early, stopped at a coffee shop 2 neighborhoods over. I didn't want to show up rattled or worse, rushed. I needed a compulse, a clear head. I sat at the back of the shop, watching the steam rise off my cup, while I pulled up the listing for 482 Alderview Court again. That house had a pool, a patio for bedrooms, and a walk-in closet bigger than our entire bedroom, built with stone and arrogance and funded by a signature I never gave. Around 10, I drove into Duskwood again, this time slower, this time as a man who already knew the truth. The security guard at the front gate barely glanced up. One look at my name on the mortgage file was all it took to wave me through. That was the part that made me sickest. Everyone believed it was mine, because on paper it was. I turned onto Alderview and parked a few houses down. Enough distance to watch, not so much that it looked suspicious. I stepped out of the car and leaned casually against the hood pretending to check my phone. A few joggers passed. An older couple walked their dog. No one knew I was there to witness a betrayal play out in real time. And then I saw her. She stepped onto the back porch through the sliding glass doors, barefoot again, hair tied up, wearing one of those oversized crewnecks with some university's logo on it. Probably Hiss. She was laughing, throwing her head back the way she used to when we first met, only this time it wasn't for me. He came out a moment later. The boyfriend. He wasn't trying to hide anything, in fact he moved like someone who knew he belonged. Tank top, basketball shorts, that smug little bounce in his step. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, pressed a kiss into her shoulder like he'd done it 100 times before. And maybe he had. They sat down on the patio chairs and sipped from matching mugs. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could tell, she was comfortable, he was at ease. And every brick in that house, every tile on that roof, had come at the cost of my credit, my identity. He stood up after a while, and walked across the yard, tossing a ball for the dog. The same golden retriever I'd seen the day before. He looked like the picture of suburban bliss, the kind of man you'd see in an insurance ad, holding a coffee in one hand and a baby monitor in the other. Talia followed him down the steps and they met under a small pergola near the back fence. They stood close, too close, and when she leaned up to kiss him, I turned away. Not because I couldn't take it, but because I didn't need more proof. I had enough. I got back in the car and drove off, not quickly, just steady, like someone running through a checklist in their head. There was nothing to say to her, nothing to ask him. I'd seen what I needed. But as I reached the gate again, something flickered in my peripheral. A flash of a camera. Someone was taking a photo from their porch. Probably a bored neighbor curious about the unfamiliar car parked on their street. I hope they got a good angle. I hope they caught the license plate. I wanted Talia and her backyard boyfriend to know I'd been there. Back at the condo I showered and changed. I didn't want their scent, real or imagined, clinging to my skin. I tossed the clothes into a trash bag and shoved them under the sink. Not because I was angry, but because I was done carrying their weight. At noon I met Shay at her office downtown. She looked the same with sharp eyes, sharp pursuits. She didn't hug me, just gestured toward the chair and slid a manila folder across the desk. I did some digging, she said, flipping open a second folder. The deed's in your name, the financing is tied to your social. But there's more. She handed me a screenshot, an Instagram post. Talia and the boyfriend, his name was Jackson, standing in front of the Duskwood house. His caption read, "New beginnings with the Queen. Home sweet home." She handed me another, a tagged photo from her cousin Marla's birthday party. Jackson was in the background, hand on Talia's waist, grinning like he just won the lottery. She didn't even try to hide it. "Here's the kicker," Shay said, sliding over a final document. "Your wife listed him as a resident beneficiary on the property insurance forms. That means if something happened to the house, he would receive the payout. Not you." I blinked. "She added him to the insurance policy?" She nodded. "Which means they didn't just sign your name and play house. They planned to keep it long term, and they wanted the money to flow in his direction if anything went south." The word conspiracy hit me again, but this time I wasn't shocked. I was steady. Shay leaned forward. "We can build a case. Fraud, forgery, misrepresentation, possibly criminal identity theft depending on what the bank decides. But I need one thing from you." "What's that?" "Don't lose your head. No revenge plans, no dramatic confrontations, just let me handle it. Paper trail only." I smiled. "No drama," I said, "just justice." She smirked. "Good. Because the kind of justice I serve comes with handcuffs or lawsuits." We spent the next hour organizing everything. I gave her every document I had, including the mortgage PDF, the forged signature, the emails and screenshots of Talia and Jackson's love nest. We drafted an official complaint for Sentinel Bank's fraud division, and outlined a plan to freeze any future transactions on the house. Before I left, Shay tapped her pen against the table and asked, "You ready for this, Marcus?" I looked her in the eye. I'd been ready since I saw him in the backyard. I walked out of her office into the cold spring air. The sky was gray, the wind sharp. But for the first time in days I wasn't numb, I wasn't broken, I was clear. But for the first time in days I wasn't numb. I wasn't broken. I was clear. They could have the backyard kisses, the coffee mugs, and the golden retriever. I had the paper trail, and now I had a plan. There's a kind of rage that doesn't explode. It doesn't scream or punch walls or throw plates. It just waits quietly like a trap. That's the kind of rage I carried into Shay's office 2 days later. By then, she'd already sent out preliminary inquiries to Sinal Bank, and we were waiting for official documents to confirm the trail of signatures, insurance policies, and digital authorizations tied to my name. But what made Shay dangerous wasn't the paperwork. It was her ability to see 10 moves ahead to build a case not just with evidence, but with intention. She didn't want revenge for me. She wanted records that would leave no room for doubt. I sat across from her while she scrolled through a folder on her screen. Her expression didn't change, but I noticed the flicker in her eyes when she found what she needed. "There's a time-stamped IP address from the e-signature," she said. "Used to finalize the mortgage application, and it traces back to your condo's Wi-Fi. Your own internet, which means she did it from your house on your network." I swallowed hard. The betrayal wasn't just deep, it was local. I'd probably been sitting in the living room when she signed it. Maybe watching a game, maybe asleep. Maybe she asked if she could borrow my laptop to order groceries and use that moment to destroy me. "There's more," she added, pulling up another document. "The homeowner's insurance on the Duskwood house includes an additional insured." I already knew what was coming. "Jackson." She nodded. "And according to the metadata from the application form, it was submitted 3 days before the mortgage finalized. That means this was premeditated, Marcus. She planned to get the house, planned to include him, and used your name to do it. That's not a mistake, that's a coordinated fraud." The words hung in the air like smoke. Premeditated, coordinated. I should have been furious. I should have wanted to slam something into the wall. But all I felt was clarity. This was no longer personal. This was strategic. "So what do we do?" I asked. She leaned back and smiled. "We freeze the battlefield." She made calls to the fraud division at Sinal Bank, formally reporting identity me. That set off a protocol. The mortgage would be flagged, payments suspended, and all associated accounts temporarily locked until the investigation concluded. Then we filed a cease and desist letter, not just to Talia, but to Jackson too. A copy was hand-delivered to the Duskwood house. Shay insisted on using a courier with a body cam. I didn't ask why. I trusted her judgment. That night, I sat in my condo and watched the notification come in. Cease and desist served successfully. Recipient attempted to argue. Audio footage available upon request. I didn't need to hear the argument. I could imagine it well enough. Talia opening the envelope, brows knitting, lips twisting. Jackson standing over her shoulder, jaw clenching as he realized his little dream life was built on a stolen foundation. My foundation. But I didn't celebrate. I didn't even smile. I just sat there, staring at the TV I'd forgotten to turn on, letting the silence settle into me. The next morning I emptied the joint checking account. Legally it was still mine. We'd opened it 5 years ago, and while most of our bills came through there, I had my own private savings account. Thank God. I'd never closed it, just kept it as backup. The joint account had close to $18,000, half of it had come from my last quarterly bonus. I transferred every cent. Within the hour I got a text, "Talia, hey, did the account glitch? I think it's empty." I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, "Talia, Marcus, did you do this? I have bills due, we have shared expenses." That word again. She wasn't done. "Talia, this is so petty. If you're trying to punish me, just say that. Don't sabotage us like this." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. But again, I said nothing. By that afternoon she tried calling, 5 times. I didn't answer. Because silence wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Let her spin. Let her talk herself into confusion. That's what people like her hated most, not knowing how much you knew or what you'd do next. Shay called later with an update. "Sinal has flagged the account. Their fraud team is reviewing the documents. Expect a notice soon confirming the freeze. Also, they asked if you'd like to place a full credit alert on your name." "Yes," I said immediately. That was the next move. I contacted all 3 credit bureaus and froze my credit entirely. That meant no loans, no credit card approvals, no leases. Nothing could be taken out in my name unless I personally lifted the freeze. Every request would be flagged. Every application denied. Talia and Jackson wouldn't be able to so much as open a department store card now. I changed all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication. I even requested an identity theft protection plan from my bank. I wasn't just playing defense anymore, I was building armor. Then I called our internet provider and had the condo's Wi-Fi password changed. That night, when Talia came back to grab some of her things, she stood outside the door punching numbers into the keypad. Nothing worked. She knocked. I didn't open. "Marcus," she said through the door, "I can't get in." Still, I said nothing. The next morning I returned the favor. I drove back to Duskwood, this time wearing sunglasses and a ball cap just to avoid being recognized by any nosy neighbor. I parked farther away this time, no hovering, no confrontation. Instead, I walked by like a man taking a casual stroll, just enough to get a clean look at the mailbox. Their expressions when they received the cease and desist must have been priceless. But it was the next envelope they'd open, the one from the mortgage lender that would really make her sick. A notice of fraud investigation. A freeze on the account. A warning about legal consequences pending confirmation of forged identity. I imagined her reading that alone at the kitchen island, where they once drank mimosas and dreamed of a future they built on someone else's name. I didn't need to be there to see her face. I already knew the color it would turn. Shay called me that night, voice calm but satisfied. "They're rattled," she said. "The courier said Jackson tried to intimidate him, threatened to call a lawyer." I chuckled. "Good. Let him." "Don't gloat," she warned. "We're not done yet." "I know," I replied. "I'm not gloating, I'm focused." And I was focused like never before because every document, every form, every login they'd used had become my silent arsenal. No raised voices, no fists, just receipts. And by the time they realized what I was building, it would already be too late. By the time Saturday rolled around, I had convinced myself I could get through the next few days without doing anything drastic. I had already laid the legal groundwork. The accounts were frozen. The documents had been delivered. The court date would be scheduled within a few weeks. In theory, all I had to do now was wait. But something kept gnawing at me, a small, bitter question that wouldn't leave me alone. How many people knew? Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized this didn't just happen behind my back. It happened in plain sight. Someone had to witness it. Someone had to co-sign her choices, encourage them, maybe even applaud them. That's what drove me to the barbecue. Thalia's family had a long-standing tradition, the spring startup, a backyard cookout they threw every March to welcome new beginnings. I had always found it cheesy, but I showed up every year anyway, flipping burgers and pretending to laugh at Deacon's beer-fueled jokes. This time I wasn't going for tradition, I was going for confirmation. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just showed up. I figured if they had the audacity to steal my name, the least I could do was show my face. The moment I stepped into the backyard, the mood shifted. It was subtle. A half-second of stilled laughter. Eyes flitting toward me, then away. The way people do when they've been caught whispering about you 5 minutes before you walked in. Deacon, Talia's younger brother, was the first to approach me. He wore his usual tank top and sunglasses, nursing a beer with a forced smile. "Hey Marcus," he said, dragging out the syllables like they hurt his tongue. "Didn't think you'd make it this year." I smiled. "Yeah. Me neither." He didn't ask about Talia. Didn't ask how I was. Just nodded and turned toward the grill like we were co-workers avoiding an HR complaint. I scanned the yard. The usual crowd was there. Her mother, Evelyn, sipping a mimosa and adjusting her wide-brimmed hat like she was posing for a garden magazine. Her cousin, Marla, always over-accessorized and oversharing. A few family friends I barely remembered the names of. No Jackson, thankfully, not yet. I grabbed a soda from the cooler and stood by the fence watching them. It didn't take long before Marla found me. She never could resist drama. She tottered over in wedge heels, sunglasses too big for her face, holding a glass of wine like it was a microphone. "Marcus," she drawled, swaying slightly. "Long time no see, you look tense." I smiled politely, just soaking it all in. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I gotta say, you really must love her." I turned toward her slowly. "Why's that?" She grinned like it was a punchline. "Buying that house for her in Jackson? That's wild. I mean bold but wild." My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just tilted my head and gave her a long, quiet look. She backpedaled quickly, trying to turn it into a joke. "I mean, it's not like I would ever do that. Sharing credit scores is one thing, but giving someone your whole identity, that's like extreme love." I said nothing, just let her ramble. And in that moment the truth crystallized. They all knew, maybe not the fine details, maybe not the forged signature or the insurance scam. But they knew about Jackson. They knew he was with Talia. They knew about the house, and not one of them had said a word. Not even Deacon, who used to call me brother after 2 beers. I looked over at Evelyn, who hadn't once looked in my direction, not even a nod, not even a twitch. I finished my drink and set the empty can down on the patio table, then I walked up the steps and approached her. She glanced up as I stood in front of her. "Marcus," she said coolly, "enjoying yourself?" I gave her a thin smile. "Lovely weather." She nodded. "Yes, it is." She reached for her purse, pulled out her lipstick and reapplied it like I wasn't standing there thinking about how she'd once told me I was the best thing to ever happen to her daughter. "I guess congratulations are in order," I said, keeping my voice light. "I hear your daughter and Jackson are settling in nicely." She froze for a split second. "Just enough. Whatever arrangement they've made is their business," she said, recapping the lipstick, "not mine." "That's interesting," I replied. "Because the house is in my name. The debt is mine. The fraud too. You're sure that's not your business?" She said nothing. I waited a moment longer, just long enough for the silence to twist. Then I turned and walked away. I didn't need more proof. I didn't need a confession. I had something better: their indifference, their silence, their complicity. This wasn't just betrayal by Talia, it was betrayal by proximity, by everyone who nodded along and said nothing while I was being replaced. As I made my way to the front yard, Deacon caught up with me. "Look man," he started. I didn't want to get in the middle. I figured whatever y'all were dealing with, you'd work it out. "You knew," I said simply. He blinked. "Not everything." "Enough," I said. "You knew enough." He lowered his gaze, suddenly fascinated by the grass. "I hope the burgers were worth it," I said, and walked away. By the time I got back in the car, I felt lighter. Not because the truth hurt less, but because it confirmed something I needed to know. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. The signs were real. The betrayal wasn't subtle. It was public, worn like perfume, and everyone around her had chosen to pretend it didn't stink. But that was fine, because while they were flipping burgers and sipping wine, I was collecting receipts. By Monday, Shay had received the bank's preliminary fraud report. The signature was flagged as non-authentic. The mortgage would be formally frozen pending litigation. Talia would be notified. The insurance carrier was also informed, and was launching its own review into Jackson's addition to the policy. It was happening, finally. But this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation of my name, my credit, my dignity. And the more they acted like it was no big deal, the more the truth would bury them quietly, legally, permanently. The thing about justice is it doesn't always come like thunder. Sometimes it slips in quietly through the back door with a clipboard and a case number. And that's exactly how it felt the morning I got the email. Subject line: mortgage account, fraud investigation status, active. I sat at my desk, coffee in hand, reading the message over and over. Sentinel Bank had launched an internal probe into the property at 482 Alderview Court. Payments were paused, interest was frozen, and no further actions would be taken until the identity claim was fully resolved. In plain terms, I wasn't legally responsible for the debt anymore, not while the case was under fraud review. I set the coffee down and leaned back in my chair. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until I saw that word. Paused. For weeks I'd been holding my breath, waiting for the financial walls to cave in, but now, I had time. I had ground beneath me again, and I was going to use every inch of it. Shay didn't waste a second. As soon as the freeze was confirmed, she went on offense. The next step was an official cease and desist sent to both Talia and Jackson, this time notarized and certified. No more informal warnings. These came with a legal bite. She called me shortly after. "They'll get the letters by end of day," she said, "and I'm drafting the fraud affidavit for court submission. We're also notifying the credit bureaus." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "What about insurance?" "Already flagged. The policy's under review. If they find forged documentation or misrepresentation, which we already suspect, they'll cancel it outright. That leaves the house uninsured and Jackson without protection." "And Talia?" She paused. "Well, that's the thing. Technically she doesn't exist on paper in this mortgage. Her name isn't on the title, not on the insurance, not on the financials, just yours. That means she has no legal right to the property." It was all starting to unravel, and I wasn't doing a thing but standing still. By noon, I got a notification from the bank. Someone had attempted to make a payment on the mortgage. Declined, account locked. The fraud flag had kicked in. I could only imagine the confusion on the other end of that transaction. I wondered if it was Jackson or Talia trying to fix what they thought was just a temporary glitch. An hour later, I received a text. "Talia, we need to talk. Why are the accounts frozen? What are you doing?" I ignored it. 10 minutes passed. "Talia, Marcus, seriously, you can't just shut down access to everything. We have responsibilities." That word again, like it still meant something. Like the minute she realized she couldn't bleed me dry anymore, we'd somehow turned into a team again. Another message. "Talia, if you think this is going to scare me, it's not. I'll fix it. We'll fix it." There was no we left. Not when she'd chosen someone else. Not when she'd written my name on a legal document like it was her signature to sell. That evening I checked the doorbell camera. It was motion activated and synced to my phone. Around 6:47 p.m., she showed up. She stood at the door with a canvas tote bag slung over her shoulder, tapping her fingers against the wood like she had every right to still be there. When she tried the key code, it didn't work. She tried again, slower, more deliberate. Still nothing. Then she rang the bell. I didn't move. I watched from the hallway, just out of view. "Marcus," she called through the door, "I know you're home." I stayed quiet. She knocked louder. "Don't do this. Come on. I know you're upset, but this is childish." That word, childish. Like I was throwing a tantrum, not recovering from betrayal that could have bankrupted me. I stepped closer to the door, just enough for her to hear my footsteps. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Her tone shifted immediately. Okay, just let's talk, please." "Nothing." Her voice dropped. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Jackson just needed a place. It was only temporary. I didn't think you'd find out like this." I closed my eyes. The lies were so casual now, like breathing. I know it looks bad, she continued, but you can't cut me out like this. Everything's in your name. You'll ruin both of us. I wanted to laugh. Now she was worried about what my name could do? I turned and walked back to the kitchen. The doorbell rang again, then again, faster this time. Like she was hoping sheer persistence would change reality. Eventually the bell stopped ringing, but I heard her voice one last time, barely above a whisper. Please, Marcus, just let me fix it. I didn't answer because she hadn't come to fix it. She came because she'd finally realized she couldn't control it anymore. The next morning I met Shay at her office to sign the official affidavit. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was simple. I did not authorize this debt. I did not sign these papers. I am not responsible. She handed me a copy to keep. This will go to the judge this week, she said. And with the mortgage frozen, the bank will likely seek a default judgment, not against you, but against the house. Once that happens, we can move for property reassignment. Meaning if they can't pay the debt and you didn't sign for it, and there's fraud involved, the court will likely transfer ownership to you, not them. The irony wasn't lost on me. A house I never wanted, never saw, never stepped foot in willingly, now on the verge of becoming mine legally, just so I could take it away from the people who stole it. I drove past it again on my way home, just once. The porch lights were off. The lawn hadn't been trimmed. A for sale sign was planted at the edge of the driveway. Clearly put up in desperation, probably without the agent realizing the legal chaos wrapped around it. Good. Let them feel uncertainty for once. Let them wonder what would be taken from them next. Back at the condo I finally slept. Not a nap, not a restless, anxious dose. Real sleep. Because the weight was shifting now. Not just the money, not just the house, but the power. And all I'd done was nothing. No yelling, no revenge schemes, just the law, just silence, just the truth. It happened on a Tuesday. I had changed the locks 2 days prior. The keypad on the front door was updated, and the garage code had been reset. I'd even replaced the spare key hidden under the garden rock, something she used to joke would get us robbed one day. Ironic in hindsight, since the biggest theft had come from inside the house. That morning I stood by the window sipping coffee and watching the quiet street unfold. It was peaceful. No more shared to-do lists. No more of her shampoo bottles claiming half the bathroom shelf. No more pretending things were okay when every silence between us was louder than any scream. And then, just before 8 a.m., I saw her car pull into the driveway. She was early. I had expected her to come by later in the day, maybe around lunch, but there she was, stepping out in a rush, tight jeans, oversized sunglasses, designer bags slung over her shoulder like armor. She didn't look like someone arriving for a calm conversation. She looked like someone ready to reclaim something she still believed was hers. She walked straight to the door and keyed in the old code. Nothing happened. She tried again. Slower this time. Her brows furrowed, her lips pursed. She stepped back and stared at the keypad like it had betrayed her. Then came the knock. Not a gentle one, not hesitant, for hard raps that echoed through the quiet of the apartment like gunshots. "Marcus," she said, her voice muffled through the door. "Open up." I didn't move. I stood at the edge of the hallway, just out of sight, watching from the corner. "I know you're in there," she called again. "Your car's right outside." I stayed silent. A pause. Then she rang the bell, twice, fast. And when that didn't work, she pounded again, more aggressively this time. "Okay, you've made your point," she said, her voice rising. "You're angry. I get it. But this is our home, Marcus. Our home." That word made something twist inside me. The same way she used we and us when it was convenient. But when she bought a house with my name for another man, there was no us in that moment. Just strategy, just lies. She sighed heavily. "I just want to get a few things. My shoes, my tablet, the documents in the top drawer. I'm not trying to fight, I just want to talk, please." Still I said nothing. She tried the keypad again. I watched her mouth the numbers to herself. Then she stepped back and dialed something on her phone. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't answer. She called again, then texted. "Talia, this is childish. What do you think locking me out proves? Talia, you changed everything? Really? Talia, do you even care what this does to us?" There it was again, the illusion of partnership. Like I had somehow pulled the rug from beneath her, and not the other way around. As of tea. After a few more minutes, she grew desperate. Her voice cracked slightly when she knocked again, softer this time. "Please, Marcus. You're freezing me out. I'm trying to fix it. Fix it." Like the truth could be undone with apologies. Like the forged signature could be scribbled away. Like Jackson hadn't slept under a roof bought with my name and kissed her on the porch I paid for. I moved to the front window, careful not to be seen, and watched her pace. She looked over her shoulder a few times, probably making sure no neighbors were watching. Her pride was unraveling by the second. Her confidence was flickering, and for once, she didn't have a script. Then she pulled something from her bag, a copy of the key. She tried it. It didn't fit. She jiggled it, pushed harder, cursed under her breath. Still nothing. I had replaced every lock on every door, I saw it then right there on her face. That moment when the realization hit. She wasn't locked out of a house, she was locked out of control. Her posture changed, the way she stood, the way her shoulders dropped. Her entire presence deflated like air from a balloon. She stared at the door for a long while and then she did something I didn't expect. She sat down on the steps, cross-legged, arms resting on her knees, like a teenager who'd just been grounded and couldn't figure out why. I stood still, waiting. She pulled out her phone again and dialed someone else. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I knew from her posture it wasn't going well. Eventually she stood up, brushed herself off, walked back to her car. Before she got in, she looked back at the door one last time. She didn't knock, she didn't speak. She just stared at it, cold and sealed and final. Then she drove off. And the second her taillights disappeared, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Later that evening, Shay called. "They've responded to the cease and desist," she said. "Talia's attorney is requesting mediation before court. I recommend declining. We hold the stronger position now." I nodded. "Decline it." "Good," she said. "I'm also moving forward with a petition to reassign the mortgage under your sole claim. Once that's done, the property becomes yours completely. And then if they try to claim occupancy or interest, they'll be in violation. We're building the case for civil damages next." I hung up and sat on the couch, the silence now feeling earned rather than imposed. The apartment was still. My phone was quiet, no more texts, no more pounding on the door. Just the oven refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards, and the peace of knowing that, for once, I was no longer on the defensive. Let her wonder what would happen next. Just the oven refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards, and the peace of knowing that, for once, I was no longer on the defensive. Let her wonder what would happen next. Let her scramble for answers. I wasn't going to fight her anymore because the war was already ending. And the locks she tried to open, they weren't just metal and code. They were boundaries, and now they were mine. The day we went to court, it was raining, not heavy, but steady, like the sky couldn't quite cry but didn't want to stay dry either. I stood under the concrete awning of the county courthouse, watching water streak down the columns. My suit felt stiff, not because it was new, but because I hadn't worn it since our anniversary dinner last year. That night she wore a red dress and kissed my cheek like we were a team. And now here we were, opposite sides. She arrived 5 minutes after I did, no umbrella, just a hooded coat and a messy bun, the kind she used to wear when she didn't care who was looking. But today, I could tell it wasn't careless, it was nervous. She wasn't putting on a show anymore. Her eyes scanned the sidewalk until they landed on me, then darted away quickly. She walked in like she didn't see me, that was fine. Shay was already inside, sitting at the front row of the gallery, her briefcase open and organized like a surgeon about to perform a very clean procedure. She didn't smile when she saw me, she just nodded. Game face. The courtroom was cold, the walls gray. Not some grand hall of justice like in movies, just a fluorescent lit room with outdated wood paneling and worn carpet. But it didn't matter. This was where it would happen. Talia sat across from me at the defense table, next to a man in a tan suit who looked like he belonged more in a real estate office than a courtroom. Her lawyer. Probably someone she pulled from a Google search the night before. The judge entered, an older woman with a steely presence. She wore glasses low on her nose and didn't waste time with pleasantries. Just straight to the case. "Devlin versus Devlin," she said. "Matter of identity fraud and property dispute." Shay stood. "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Marcus Devlin, is the legal signer on a $750,000 mortgage for a property located at 482 Alderview Court. However, he did not authorize, initiate, or knowingly consent to the mortgage, nor does he reside at the property." The judge glanced at Talia. "Is that correct, ma'am?" Her lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we don't deny that Mr. Devlin's name is on the paperwork. However, my client believed she had implied consent as she and Mr. Devlin were married at the time. She assumed joint authority over financial matters." "Implied consent does not equate to a legal signature," Shay interrupted calmly but firmly, "especially not on a $500,000 debt. We have evidence of forged documents, including a handwriting analysis and IP metadata showing the mortgage was submitted without Mr. Devlin's knowledge." The judge nodded, flipping through the file. "I see the analysis here. Mr. Devlin, can you confirm this is not your signature?" I stood. "That's correct, Your Honor. It's a forgery." She motioned for me to sit. "Mrs. Devlin, did you sign your husband's name on the mortgage?" Talia hesitated. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something. She looked at me briefly, then at the judge. "Yes, I did." My stomach turned. Not because it was a surprise, but because hearing her admit it out loud stripped the last layer of denial from everything. The judge's face didn't move. "Did your husband know you were signing his name?" "No," she said quietly. "Did you inform him at any point before the mortgage was approved?" "No." The judge made a note, then asked, "And the individual listed as a resident beneficiary on the property insurance, Jackson Pierce, is that someone you live with currently?" Her eyes dropped to the table. Not anymore. That one line said everything. Her lawyer stood again, trying to shift the tone. Your Honor, while we acknowledge a procedural misstep, my client's intentions were not malicious. She believed she was acting in the best interest of her household. This was an internal marital matter. Shay cut in. Fraud is not a private disagreement. It's a crime. The judge held up a hand. Enough. The room went quiet. She turned to me. Mr. Devlin, are you seeking financial damages or solely property reassignment at this time? I took a breath. I want my name cleared. The debt reversed in full ownership of the house as restitution. The judge nodded. Understood. Talia's lawyer whispered again. She nodded. And this time she stood. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. The judge tilted her head, assessing. Go ahead. She turned toward me. Not the judge. Not the room. Just me. I didn't do this to hurt you, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to become this big. I thought it would. I thought it would just pass. That no one would notice. She glanced at her hands, then back up. Jackson and I, it wasn't supposed to be serious. But it got serious. And I felt like I had already messed up so much that fixing it was impossible. So I stopped trying. I didn't speak. She kept going. When I used her name, I told myself it was temporary, that you wouldn't find out. Or if you did, I'd explain it away. But then it all spiraled. The house, the insurance, the payments. And by then I didn't know how to stop. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry. I am. The courtroom was silent. Even Shay, who rarely gave space for emotion, let it hang for a moment before turning back to the judge. Your Honor, the apology is noted, but intent does not erase harm. And that was the truth. The judge cleared her throat. Based on the evidence and the admission from Mrs. Devlin, I am issuing a temporary transfer of mortgage responsibility to Mr. Devlin pending formal reassignment. The bank will be instructed to remove liability from the plaintiff. Furthermore, I am approving a hearing for civil damages next month. Mrs. Devlin, you will also be referred to the district attorney's office for potential criminal review. Talia's face went pale. Criminal review. She hadn't expected that. Her lawyer tried to protest, but the judge had already moved on. The gavel came down like thunder. One clean strike, one final verdict for now. Afterward, outside the courthouse, she caught up to me. I heard her boots on the wet sidewalk before I saw her face. Marcus, she called. Please wait. I stopped, but I didn't turn. I meant what I said, she whispered about being sorry. I looked over my shoulder, finally meeting her eyes. I know, I said. And then I walked away because apology didn't cancel consequence and sorrow couldn't unsign a lie. The official notice came in a white envelope stamped with a blue emblem from Sentinel Bank, and a return address in a city I'd never been to. It arrived on a Wednesday. I remember because the mailman, a guy named Owen who always wore earbuds and waved without speaking, paused just long enough to look at me differently. Like he could sense something important was in his hands. I didn't open it right away. I carried it into the kitchen, set it on the counter beside the coffee pot, and just stared at it. Not because I was nervous. I already knew what was inside. But some things demand a moment of silence before they're unsealed. I poured myself a cup, sat down, took one last breath as a man whose name had been tied to someone else's house, someone else's lie, someone else's version of a future. And then I opened it. Subject, mortgage reassignment and title transfer. Case ID number 948,127. The letter confirmed it all in neat, clinical language. The fraudulent mortgage tied to my name had been voided. The loan would be marked as discharged. The debt no longer belonged to me. However, because the court had ruled in my favor, and because the fraudulent party had defaulted, the property was now mine by legal reassignment. A house I never chose, never walked through willingly, never asked to see beyond photos, and now, it was mine. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in the drawer with the others. The cease and desists, the affidavit, the court summons. Together, they told a story, not of a man who won something, but of a man who refused to be buried by what wasn't his. That afternoon, I drove to Duskwood one final time. No disguises, no slow cruises. I pulled right into the driveway like I'd lived there my whole life. The for sale sign was still there, tilted slightly from the wind, but now it meant nothing. No one could sell this place unless I said so. I stepped out of the car and took a slow look around. The lawn was overgrown. The roses she once bragged about on Instagram had wilted. The windows were shut tight, but one of the blinds was bent, like someone had peeked out and forgotten to fix it. The house felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. I had the new key in my pocket. Slipping it into the lock, I turned it once and pushed open the front door. The air inside was stale, cold. I could still smell lavender from whatever diffuser they'd left plugged in. I stood in the doorway for a moment, half expecting voices, movement. But the silence was complete. The furniture was still there. She hadn't taken it yet. A beige couch, a coffee table stacked with magazines, a tall floor lamp with a missing bulb. It looked like they had left in a hurry, or maybe they hadn't truly believed the day would come when they'd be locked out of what they'd stolen. I walked through the kitchen. The granite countertops were spotless, too spotless, like someone had wiped them down nervously, maybe hoping the evidence would vanish with the crumbs. The fridge was empty, a few magnets remained, one with her cousin's wedding date. Another shaped like a pineapple that read "Bless this mess." I stepped into the master bedroom. That was harder. The bed was unmade, sheets crumpled. There was a single high heel under the dresser, forgotten in the scramble. On the nightstand sat a half-burned candle and a phone charger that no longer had a phone to serve. I didn't touch anything. I didn't want to. This wasn't a victory lap. I wasn't there to gloat or to imagine some dramatic monologue about reclaiming what was mine. The truth was, this place had never felt like mine. Even now, with the deed in my name and the law on my side, it still felt like a lie. A beautifully staged set built on betrayal. I walked into the backyard. The pergola where I had once seen them together was still standing. The patio chairs were gone, but the ghost of their presence remained. I could still see her laugh, the way he used to press his hand into her lower back, the way she looked so free, not just from me, but from everything I thought we'd built. I stood there for a long time, and then I turned around, walked back inside and called a real estate agent. Her name was Clara. I told her I wanted the house listed immediately as is. I didn't care about staging or repairs, just get it off my hands. She asked me if I wanted to tour the property first, maybe get a sense of what it could sell for. I told her I didn't need to, it wasn't my home, it was a symbol, and I was ready to let it go. Over the next few weeks, Clara worked her magic. The market was strong and the house was in a coveted zip code. We got 2 offers within 10 days. I accepted the one that came in above asking. The profits easily covered all my legal fees and then some. When the deal closed, I didn't celebrate. No champagne, no Instagram post. Just a quiet dinner alone and a long walk by the lake near my new place. Because yes, I had moved out of the condo away from the city noise. I found a small cabin upstate. Nothing fancy. Just a wide porch, a wood-burning stove, and a view of the water that didn't need filters or curtains. I bought it under my own name. Paid in full, no loans, no lies, no one else's fingerprints on the deed. It was peaceful there. And every evening as the sun dipped below the tree line, I sat outside and breathed deep, clean, uninterrupted breaths. The kind you forget you need when your life is filled with manipulation disguised as compromise. Sometimes I'd wonder if she ever drove past the old house. If she stared at it and remembered how it all began. How she used my name like a spare key and let someone else move in behind it, if she ever regretted it. But mostly, I didn't think of her at all because that house wasn't the ending. It was the reminder of what I lost, of what I reclaimed, of what I would never allow again. The house became mine, yes, but it was never my home. That title belonged to something quieter now, something earned. They say when a storm passes, everything feels clearer. The sky softens, the wind eases, and suddenly you can see what survived. I didn't fully understand that until I was sitting on the porch of my cabin, watching fog roll off the lake in long, lazy streaks. It was early morning, the kind where even the birds sleep in. I had no messages, no calls, no one knocking, demanding explanations or access, just peace. For the first time in years my world was quiet, and it was mine. It had taken months to get here, months of legal battles, paperwork, meetings, and silence so sharp it could cut. But I'd made it through, not with anger, not with theatrics, just calm, deliberate steps. People expected explosions. I gave them strategy. They thought I'd beg. I built boundaries instead. When I first bought the cabin, everyone thought I was running away. Even Nate, my oldest friend, asked if I was sure I wanted to live in the middle of nowhere. But I wasn't running. I was arriving. For the first time in my life I was planting myself somewhere no one could uproot me from. The day the final court document came through, a clean judgment that removed all ties between my name and Talia's mess, I didn't celebrate with champagne or fireworks. I printed the paper, signed it, framed it, and hung it in my office, not because I wanted a trophy, but because I needed the reminder. My name was no longer something someone else could borrow, bend, or betray. It was mine again. Fully, legally, spiritually. I started using it differently, not loudly but intentionally. I updated all my accounts, changed my passwords, switched to a new bank that didn't have memories baked into every transaction. I even updated my emergency contacts. For years her name had sat there by default, not anymore. Now when I introduced myself to someone new, I didn't do it with a hesitant smile or an invisible asterisk. I just said Marcus Devlin, and let it stand. Strong, steady, unapologetic. People ask me sometimes if I forgave her. It's a strange question. Forgiveness isn't something you announce like a weather forecast. It's not an act for them, it's a release for you. So, did I forgive her? I forgave myself first for not seeing the signs, for dismissing my own intuition, for believing that love meant silence and loyalty meant sacrifice no matter how one-sided. Forgiving her? That came later, quietly, in pieces. Not because she deserved it, but because I deserved to stop carrying her weight. There was a time I thought revenge would feel sweeter, that reclaiming what was mine would come with a cinematic satisfaction, something dramatic, something final. But the truth? The real power was in letting go. I didn't need to ruin her life. I just needed to remove myself from it. And when she eventually called months later, from a number I didn't recognize, I let it ring. Just once. Then I blocked it. Because the man she used to control no longer existed. She had tried to rewrite my name into her story, tried to make me the footnote to her fresh start. But she forgot one thing. I didn't need a new story, I just needed the truth of mine to stand, unedited, undistorted, fully mine. In the quiet of that truth I began to rebuild not just my finances but my sense of self. I started small. Learned to cook again, took long walks, reached out to friends I'd lost touch with during the chaos. Some came back, some didn't, but I didn't beg anyone to stay. I was done with that version of me. I read more, wrote more. I even started consulting for small businesses, helping people protect their assets, build clean contracts, create systems that couldn't be stolen with a forged signature. I didn't advertise it much, it spread by word of mouth. People who'd been burned found their way to me, and I helped them quietly the way Shay helped me. Shay and I kept in touch. She invited me to her firm's 10-year anniversary. I wore the same suit I'd worn to court, only this time, it didn't feel like armor. It just felt like mine. She smiled when she saw me. "You look lighter," she said. I told her I was. She clinked her glass to mine and whispered, "Your case? Still my favorite." It wasn't because it was juicy or scandalous. It was because I didn't scream. I didn't post revenge videos or sin-threatening texts. I let the paper do the talking. And that, in her words, was the most satisfying justice of all. One afternoon, almost a year after it all began, I drove past Alderview. The house looked different now. New owners. The roses were blooming again. A swing set had been added to the backyard. Someone had painted the shutters blue. It didn't hurt to see it. It didn't stir rage or sadness. It just was a house. Nothing more. I rolled down the window, let the breeze drift in, then drove away. I didn't look back. That night, back at the cabin, I lit a fire and opened a new journal. Clean pages, no scribbles, no lists, just space. I wrote a single line across the top. This time, I live by my name, not theirs. Because in the end, that was the victory. Not the house, not the legal win, not even the silence. The victory was choosing my terms, and no longer letting anyone else write over them. So yes, my name was once used without my consent. But now it only moves when I say so. And that is the only signature I'll ever need.